Ladies and gentlemen, today I'd like to talk to you about food. Obviously it's rather a subjective issue as to whether you like food or not. Some people find one thing tasty and others will prefer another. But there is some science behind this too, which I've recently discovered and which I would like to share with you today. So I grew up in England, and as I'm sure you're aware, traditional English food does not have a reputation for being particularly tasty. The food which we used to eat before the wonderful influences of India and other places came to our dining table, the food had a reputation, at least in Europe, for being rather insipid. As I was growing up, I discovered two strong flavours which particularly appealed to me. One is Marmite, a yeast extract spread, which very much divides opinion in the UK. They say you either love it or you hate it, and I certainly loved it. It livened up my food no end. It was virtually the only thing I considered to be truly yummy. Worcester sauce is in the same category. It's a little black bottle of sauce that you can add a few drops to food or to drinks, such as tomato juice, and it also gives them an extra buzz, an extra little bit of tastiness. And this was written off by friends and family as just being my peculiar taste, until I discovered the science, which I'll refer to in a moment. I left England and lived in other European countries and fell in love with Italian food, as of course many people do. Dishes being, for instance, the famous insalata caprese with mozzarella cheese and balsamic vinegar, or pasta with a combination of, say, mushrooms in the sauce and a little bit of grated parmesan on top, or perhaps some anchovies with a little bit of garlic. The kind of Mediterranean food that people get very excited about in Northern Europe, North America, and pretty well everywhere in the world. Now, you may ask where I'm going with this. This is not just some sort of mouth-watering speech to get you in the mood for your lunch. I'll come back, as I promised I would, to the science. There is actually a scientific explanation why all of the things I've mentioned so far are yummy. And the answer is what the Japanese call umami. This is the sixth taste. It's not sweet or savoury or sour or bitter or... no, hang on, it's the fifth taste. It's not either any of those four, it's the fifth one. There's another article about the sixth taste, which I'll leave for another speech, but today I'm talking about the fifth taste. It was discovered by a Japanese professor who was actually in Leipzig, Germany at the time, in 1899. He enjoyed some of the meat and cheese, which he tried in Germany, but nothing matched his wife's soup. Back home in Japan, this soup included tuna flakes and mushroom and seaweed. And he decided to perform a chemical analysis as to what it was that made food yummy for him, having had this exposure to international experience and different tastes in food. And he discovered that there was an element which you can isolate. Monosodium glutamate, or MSG, also known as umami, is present as one element which you can isolate, as I say, but it is also produced in combinations of flavours. So Marmite has it, Worcester sauce has it, but also the combination of ripe tomatoes and mozzarella cheese, the combination of mushroom and parmesan, and the combination of anchovy and garlic produce this, as does the first combination that he tested it on, tuna flakes, mushroom, and especially seaweed. Give the dish that extra punch, that indefinable yumminess, I want to say. But of course it's not indefinable. There is, in fact, science now to explain this. There's been some confusion about MSG. In the US, in the New England Journal of Medicine, an article was published in 1968 in which the author, a doctor, claimed that he'd suffered adverse health effects following a Chinese meal. And he described this in some detail, and this became known as Chinese restaurant syndrome, and MSG became stigmatized as a result. There was an effect of palpitations and a feeling of numbness that were associated with this substance, and that gave Chinese restaurants in America a bad reputation for many years. It turned out that the whole article was a hoax. The author confessed to this in 2018, so a full 50 years after publishing the article. The then 96-year-old retired doctor said that the whole thing had been a hoax. And of course there was perhaps some prejudice in society at the time. There were ethnic stereotypes. One might even say that it was a racist assumption. There was a rejection of the other, the foreign food, the Chinese food in the US. And now I'm pleased to say that American dictionaries describe Chinese restaurant syndrome now, in 2022, as being a dated and offensive term. This is because we've discovered the joys of umami. And in case anyone still has any lingering preconceptions about Chinese restaurants, as I have described in chemical terms, in scientific terms, this is also present in Mediterranean-style tomato dishes and also bacon. Now, that's a staple of the US, as it is of the UK, breakfast. And nobody's ever claimed to have palpitations or numbness as a result of having a cooked breakfast in the US or the UK. So I think the argument that this was linked to some sort of prejudice is a strong one. I've come to love China and Chinese food, and there are combinations there too of soy sauce and fermented bean curd, and of course seaweed as in Japanese cuisine, which are incredibly tasty. And so I've gone from being a boy who just thought Marmite was yummy to discovering an entire world of new pleasure across China with all of the yummy food that is umami. And if you enjoy any of the dishes I've mentioned, or perhaps other combinations too, maybe the explanation for that pleasure will be the same one. So next time you tuck into something that you find particularly yummy, I hope you'll get some extra pleasure from the knowledge that it's not just yummy, it's probably scientifically yummy. Bon appétit!